Brought to you by the PlayStation Experience in Las Vegas. Take part in all the announcements, panels, and early game previews December 6th and 7th.
Hey guys, and welcome to Reality Check. Now, last week on the show, I delved into the psychology of character creation, answering seminal questions like, why do we choose to create ourselves? Could it actually be about validating our real-world appearance? And when will games finally include a bum chin slider? And this week, in what I'm creatively calling Part 2, it's time to investigate the motivations behind creating characters who do not resemble us, including playing as different genders, races, and also how the characters we choose to create could actually be affecting us.
Well, some of the research in our lab on the first Dragon Age game suggested that approximately 30% of men play as women in the game, but less than 10% of women play as men. So there's a sex asymmetry here.
So why do people do this? What could be the psychology behind this decision-making?
We think the reason is possibly that one of the great things that games offer is, first of all, equality across the sexes. It doesn't matter whether you play as a man or a woman. You have the same abilities, the same strength. One of the other reasons we might choose to play as a member of the opposite sex is that this gives us an opportunity to experience things through the eyes of somebody else. Particularly if we're a man playing as a woman, we may be exposed to some of the experiences of casual harassment, which women are far more familiar with than men are. Similarly, if you play as a member of a stigmatized minority. Now, as a middle-aged, middle-class white man, I have very little experience of prejudice, but if I play as a stigmatized race in Dragon Age, okay, it's not the real thing, but I can start to understand, perhaps, a little about what it feels like.
Tell me why we shouldn't kill you now.
I think another possible reason why so many men choose to play as a woman is that if you play a typical game, which may take 30, 40, 50 hours in total to complete, and it's a third-person game, you're going to spend an awful lot of time looking at the rear end of your character. It may be that a man prefers to look at the rear end of a woman.
Well, that last point was certainly something echoed in the comments on last week's episode. But what about the sex asymmetry Mark mentioned? Are women just less up for trying new experiences in games? Now, that doesn't sound right to me, so perhaps there's something else going on here.
We think one of the reasons why so many women choose to play as women and only a small minority play as men is something that's been termed the Lara phenomenon. This is reflected by Lara Croft, and it's the idea that when there is a strong female protagonist, when the woman can lead the game, then this is extremely attractive to women because this is something that they're typically denied in the real world. In fact, in movies, there's something called the Bechdel test, which is a test of whether there is a scene in a movie where two named women talk about anything that doesn't involve a man. Most movies fail the Bechdel test. Most games pass it easily.
Regardless of how you choose to create your character though, the key is that you get to shape and mold them however you want. But what you might not realize is as well as you shaping them, they might also be able to have an impact on how you behave in the game.
If you give people for instance, a sexualized avatar, so an avatar that's dressed provocatively, they will tend to behave in a slightly more sexualized way in-game. The effects of your online character on you, on your sense of self, has been called the Proteus effect. It's after the Greek god who could take on many different forms. We are protean as gamers. We create many different forms that we play with. And those forms affect who we are. We think about these different digital selves in pretty much the same way that we think about our real physical offline self, that they have their own motivations, their own desires, and we're formed of all of these different selves.
But you know, that's not the end of it. In fact, the character you create could actually have an impact on your real-world behavior, even after you put the controller down and turn off the computer.
It's undoubtedly the case that the sorts of actions we take within a game cross the membrane into our real lives. A lot of the effects that have been demonstrated are very short-term effects. They're not the sorts of effects that make us go out and commit acts of violent crime. They may increase our aggression level for a very short period of time. Of course, they may also make us more cooperative. It's almost certainly the case that the broadening of our experience, the experience of different selves, is more positive than negative.
So tell me your experiences with character creation. Do you ever play as a different gender? And have you ever caught yourself behaving in a real-world situation in a similar way to how your character might? Let me know in the comments down below or by getting in touch with me on Twitter. Oh, and also, I'd love for you guys to send me pictures of your latest creations from whatever game you happen to be playing. It's always fun to see the characters that other people wind up creating. Next week, I'll be delving into the science of cheat bots. What are they? How do they work? And could they be a real danger to our beloved hobby? I'll see you then.